Good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Monday, February 7th, 2022 Currituck Board of Commissioners meeting. At 5 o'clock, we had a work session with our county sheriff. And at the first order of business is our invocation and pledge of allegiance. And I'd ask Vice Chairman Beaumont if he'd lead us in that tonight.
Thank you. Heavenly Father, thank you for this glorious evening. Lord, I pray that you would bless us this evening, Father, that you would give this Board of Commissioners wisdom as they consider the issues before us. Father, I pray safety on each and every person here, that they would have traveling mercy ahead of time, Lord, that they would be able to arrive safely at their destination. Lord, bless this evening, bless Currituck County, in Jesus' name I ask.
Amen.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Commissioner Beaumont. The next item is the approval of agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda this evening?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one for administrative reports. The Sheriff's Office recognition and presentation of advanced law enforcement certificates due to some scheduling issues. We're going to move that to the second meeting in February, which we have, I guess, a couple life-saving awards on that, and some of those are the same parties involved.
All right, we'll get that removed for today. Any other changes to the agenda? If none, can I get a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
On the second, any other discussions? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Thank you. The next item on our agenda is our appointment of the county manager by the Board of Commissioners. Let me just say that this board has had discussions, as everyone knows, that we had to replace our county manager, and our county attorney has been filling that temporary role, and we've had numerous discussions, and then we've had discussions with Ike McCree, and the board has made a decision to offer the position to the the position of the county manager to Ike McCree, and the board needs to take action on this at this time. So I'd ask the board for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to appoint Ike McCree as Currituck County Manager effective February the 7th, 2022.
Second.
I have a motion to second. Any further discussion on this? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Well, it's official. County Manager, Ike McCree.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to all the board members as well. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to it.
Thank you, sir. We look forward as well working with you. The next item is public comment. Under public comment is a time for individuals to come before this board. Interrupted time to discuss any matters, point out anything good, bad, and different. And we will listen intently. I have no one signed up this evening for public comment. Is there anyone that wants to speak that didn't get a chance to sign it? If not, if you please come forward up to the mic up here and state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, I'm Jeff Foster, and my address is 166 Baxter Estates Road.
Thank you, sir. Please go ahead and proceed then.
Yeah, I've been involved somewhat for a couple years now with trying to develop a campground in Currituck County, and I've been to several meetings. And when we first started, we were in a 20-acre area, and then somehow another 3 or 4 months ago, it went to 50 acres and a 5-mile restriction. So I'm not sure if I missed a meeting or where that arbitrarily happened, but then I kind of got away from it for 3 or 4 months. And then I was here a couple weeks ago with the planning board, and a couple of us got to speak, and it was recommended that they went back to 15 acres, and then they got rid of the 5-mile restriction. So I guess I'm here to support that. And I've been in Currituck for 30-some years since I got out of the Army. And this was like a retirement thing for me that I was going to develop in the bottom of the county, closer to the bridge. And I thought the issue at first was they didn't want to see the campground turn into a lodging place for people of other counties and things. And somehow or another, maybe That's turned into 50 acres. But I felt like it is taking some of the small business people out of this, like myself. And I don't know of many options in the southern part of the county that is for sale with 50 acres, other than, the ones by the water park, which, not too many people have $7 million to buy that. So,
Okay, thank you. Well, just so you know, we do have an item under public hearings, item D, regarding the campgrounds, and there will be a public hearing section on that if you want to address that.
I thought that was this now.
Well,
That's
the
not this
public
now?
comment is for anything we want to talk, the public wants to talk about. There's specifically on these items, there's actually a public hearing piece that addresses the campgrounds, allows anyone who wanted to speak on it to come forward, but that's fine.
Yeah.
If that's what your intention was, when I open this up, you can come up again if you'd like.
I'll
I
try
mean,
it again
if you
then.
like, and I can.
The whole
address
process
it
has
then.
been a little confusing.
Okay,
but,
well,
yeah.
that's fine, I understand, but this is the time to speak anything that you want, including this, so.
Okay,
that's
well, then
perfectly fine.
I'll come
Okay.
back up then.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we had, no one else signed up for public comment. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak at this time? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public comment portion. And our next item is the Commissioner's report. And this evening, I'm going to start on my left and start with Commissioner Selena Jarvis.
Thank you. First, I want to thank our wonderfully dedicated staff for making our annual retreat a success. A lot of hard work and time and energy and preparation went into that, and I am truly thankful. I know day to day some of the things that our staff does is often overlooked and certainly taken for granted, but our staff is vital to the well-being of every citizen of the county, and I just want to say I'm grateful to have such a great dedicated staff. Second, February is American Heart Month, and of course right in the middle of American Heart Month is Valentine's Day. And while many of us will give and receive flowers, gifts, and cards, many more people will feel lonely, isolated, and sad on this day. So I encourage you to reach out to people that you care about, who you know are struggling, who may have lost loved ones, especially in the last year, that this day becomes especially difficult. And that often dread days like Valentine's Day. Let them know they're not alone, that you care about them, because a small gesture can truly save someone's life. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jarvis. Commissioner Etheridge.
Thank you. I would like to thank and congratulate our board on our appointment of our new county manager. I look forward to working with the new county manager, and I know that he'll lead and manage our county and staff successfully. And I'd like to thank you, too, for accepting the position.
Well, thank you, and thank you again for the opportunity and your faith in me.
And now I have a little election news. I think everything's been up in turmoil. The candidate filing opened and closed. Well, it's going to open back up again for the 2022 primary. It's going to resume at 8 a.m. on Thursday, February the 24th, and it'll end on Friday, May the 4th, by issue from the Superior Court of Wake County. So anything could change, but if you're interested in running for office, contact the election board. Her number is 232-2525, and the primary election will be held on Tuesday, May the 17th, 2022. Thank you.
Miss Kitty, I think you said May 4th. Is it
said
March
May
4th? I think it ends on March 4th.
March the 4th.
March
yeah.
4th.
It's a long.
I was just gonna say, man.
No problem. That's a long.
You got a long time to think about, contemplate that $140.
Thank you, Ms. Etheridge. Commissioner White.
Thank you, sir. I'll be brief. Ike, congratulations again from me. Look forward to working you with in a different capacity as the future rolls on. And other than that, I'll just want to let the board know I will not be at their next meeting. I'll be in Florida on my anniversary, pretending to be a pirate and find all the rum I can in Florida.
Congratulations.
Why is the rum always?
Right, exactly.
That's why I have rub shoulders. Okay.
Yes, exactly. So that's it for me tonight, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner White. And I will just, again, reiterate, look forward to working with our new county manager. That being said, that now opens up a search for a county attorney. So we will be looking for a replacement for our county attorney position. So that'll be our next item up for this board to start looking at. The next one thing I do want to let the individuals know out there is during our retreat, of course, it's always open to the public and media and the newspapers, and just want to clarify a couple things. As you read stuff in the local paper, sometimes it doesn't get worded exactly correctly, but a couple things this board decided to do during our retreat is start the Citizens Academy again. That's where we're going to start getting, take applications for citizens to come in and go through what we're calling an academy to learn more about the local government, meet the planning staff, different, our election board, all different staff and departments, get a chance to understand what goes on in county government. And another item that we discussed was how can we educate our citizens on unified government, the pros, the cons, what it's about, and just an educational series. Let them ask this board questions or staff questions. By no means was this board even discussing putting it on the ballot for this year. So I want to clear that up. This was how do we educate our citizens on a lot of different things going on in our county. So, I mean, I'm getting phone calls of why we're putting it on the ballot, which that wasn't even discussed. So I just want to clear that up for our newspaper. If they're listening again, they can clarify that. Other than that, just we're still having a lot of fires. The fire departments are busy, getting fire calls, grass calls, accidents. So just be careful out there and support your volunteer firefighters. And that's all I have to say this evening. Commissioner Beaumont.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really brief tonight. Again, echoing the previous members of the board, congratulations to Ike for his new role in serving Currituck County. And that's number one. And number two, for those that weren't following all the details of our retreat, probably the single most impressive statistic that we received was on the second year evaluation of the sand on Currituck County's beaches. And there's been a lot of discussion over the years since I've been on the board about beach nourishment, which long and short of is renting sand from the ocean and then giving it back over time at a very expensive rate of return. And the results came in this year, and it's a 1 year snapshot. But Currituck County, we owe a giant thanks to Virginia Beach. We added 1.118 million cubic yards of sand in Currituck County's beaches. So, I've long been a fan of metrics and statistics and science and engineering. And so I can tell you that with the exception of just a couple of, notables, that in general, Currituck County's beaches are probably the best in the state. Pretty darn close. So we just, for those of you that live in Virginia, continue to encourage Virginia Beach with their plan because it's helping us.
It's working well for us.
It's sand and it shifts. So, but that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. And next is Commissioner McCord.
I'd like to, like the rest of the board, congratulate our new county manager. So he's not the CAM anymore, the county manager attorney, but or attorney manager. And I think he's going to do an excellent job. I called him the other night. I figured I could catch him on the way riding home, and he was still at the office late. So I think he's excited and wish him well, and I know we'll help him any way we can. Last week was the 2 days we had of the retreat where we went over a lot of stuff at the county going on and going in the future. The first day was a little long, got out a little bit later, but so I think we got a lot accomplished. The staff did an excellent job preparing all the stuff, the different department heads. Like they stated in our previous audit or whatever, how great the county's doing financially. So I was like, that the staff plays a role in that. So we're very fortunate to live here. Our tax rate's number 8 out of 100. We got an email today, 8 out of 100 on the lowest tax rate. So I think that's pretty impressive, and that goes from the county staff and the county commissioners, us. I'm not patting us on the back, but as well as the county managers of how conservative and everything that they do a good job. So kudos on that. During the retreat that we had I just want to mention Gina Maurer, our animal. She's in charge of animal control as well as the animal shelter. They did a great job last week. I'm the commissioner that sits on the animal control / shelter board with those 60+ labs, which I think they've pretty much adopted them all out. They've stopped taking applications because they've had so many, and the donations from the community. We live in a great place. If you read some of the social media pages, people say different. Like I've said in the past, and I'll say it today, if they don't like it, they can always move. The housing market's great. But like I said, that's my favorite line. But they do an awesome job, like Gina and them, and I mean, like, they do really, really good, and all the departments do in the county. So like I said, I talked to Gina probably 15 times in the last. Actually, I talked to her today, and I even sent the county manager a text because we were in a meeting and she couldn't get up with him, so she had sent me a text. So I sent him, but like I said, good job on that. And like I said, there were some issues there for that individual. But like all the animals and everything are safe now, so that's a positive. But just a continuous that we do live in a great place, low crime, low tax rate, and we have a lot of great people that live here. So appreciate all the support from the local businesses and people. And it's crazy how much. I went there it was Monday when they opened back up, Monday morning. After that, and the whole staff worked the whole weekend because they had so much to do with care for the animals and everything. And it just shows of how dedicated the level of staff that the county has. And I'm thankful, and I'm part of them as well. So, but good job to everybody. And the fire, like Chairman Payment mentioned too about the house fires and stuff like that. My phone literally paged of a structure fire when he said that. So in the county. So like I said, be careful if you use those space heaters. Make sure your fire alarms are up to date with batteries. The fire departments have programs where they'll help you with that. And that pretty much covers it all. And thank you to everybody.
Thank you, Commissioner McCord. And finally, Commissioner Etheridge.
I'll be brief. Congratulations, Ike, and we look forward to working with you, and hope your tenure is long and prosperous. That's it.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Commissioner Etheridge. And the next item is our county manager's report, which will also still include, because he still is taking the duties of a county attorney until we get that filled, so the attorney's report as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to echo about our animal control department and its employees who did an outstanding job. On January 28th, while we were in the retreat, we were getting texts that there were 61 dogs that were being taken into custody by the department due to horrendous conditions, and some of those pictures are indeed horrendous of the conditions these dogs were living in. But also the outreach from not only this community, but communities far and wide that responded to the need for blankets and sheets, and especially food. We received, I understand, so much food, pallets of food, that we're going to be able, I think, to share that with some other needing agencies, certainly around northeastern North Carolina. Look forward to doing that soon. We also appreciate the more than 9,000 positive Facebook comments that the county received, I understand, in response to the good work of our animal control department. So much respect and accolades to them and their hard work. Last week I met with some representatives of the Administrative Office of the Courts, the Clerk of Court, Logan Steese, I'll just say a fantastic IT director that serves us. Over in the Judicial Center, the state is funding, basically putting in video conferencing in all the courtrooms across the state. The state is funding one courtroom per county, so we'll be getting some video conferencing ability in at least one of our courtrooms at the state expense. It will be the county's expense to do the other one to the tune of about $100,000 or so. But we'll talk about that during budget time as to whether that's something that we want to do. It could have some good cost savings to the county because it's going to allow, among other things, in criminal matters for criminal defendants to appear from where they are currently housed or incarcerated rather than having to be transported to and from the courtroom from from not just this county jail, but from some other places around the state where they may be housed. From the civil side, it may also enhance and help civil matters move along, as it may allow for attorneys in other parts of the state to participate in hearings rather than having to come all the way to Currituck County. So we're moving into a new realm of judicial proceedings that I'm certainly not accustomed to, but looking forward to seeing how that's going to benefit the taxpayers and make for a more efficient judicial system in the future. But I'll be bringing you further information about that as we go forward. And then on Wednesday afternoon, I'll be in Beaufort. I'm a member of the Coastal Resources Advisory Council. It's appointed by the Coastal Resources Commission to help that body with its work on coastal policy making and issues. But I'll be back in the office Thursday morning. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McCree. Okay, the next item, since administrative has been removed, is under public hearings. The first item we have is PB 21-27 H2OBX, text amendment to allow seasonal employee housing for tourist-oriented businesses located on the same principal lot as the business with a minimum lot size of 5 acres. I believe we have our planning director, Kevin.
Thank you, Chairman. As you mentioned, this is a text amendment that would allow seasonal employee housing to be located on the same lot as a tourist-oriented business. And I'll go through this and let you know the definition of that. Just to give you a little background, this text amendment was brought forward by the owners of H2OBX. They were approved in 2016 for a conditional rezoning. Included in that rezoning was a dormitory that sat at the rear of the site. What this text amendment does is change that definition to seasonal temporary housing, which is in conjunction with the next item where they do propose some temporary housing. The request is really divided into 5 things. The first is that it adds the seasonal employee housing as an accessory use to the outdoor recreation entertainment use category, and this is the category that H2OBX is. Number 2, it makes seasonal employee housing an accessory use in the GB zoning district, but also to note it is a conditional rezoning. Number 3, it defines certain use criteria, which I will give details of shortly. Number 4, it defines the off-street parking requirements. And finally, it defines seasonal employee housing and tourist-oriented business. So that first, item 1, you see it just adds seasonal employee housing as a use, accessory use in the recreation entertainment. The table below shows that it is a conditional zoning in the GB district. It's an accessory use, and the GB district is the only district where this would apply. Here, third item is where we really get to the guts of the request, and that is the performance standards that this text amendment would have. In order to have that seasonal housing, these 5 conditions have to be met. First, it's limited to a tourist-oriented business, which I'll get to the definition shortly. Second, provide annual occupancy dates, and so that's really the dates of the tourist season, and that's the only time when it could be inhabited. Third, it's located on the same lot as the business with a minimum lot size of 5 acres. Fourth, it be inhabited only during the tourist season for residential use and only by employees of the facility. Lastly, the use of Class B or Class C manufactured homes is prohibited, as well as RV and trailers. Think single wides. Single wides are prohibited. You could have a double wide or a stick-built structure. Fourth item there, seasonal employee housing, the parking 1 per every 2 residential beds. And lastly, the definitions. So for seasonal employee housing, it's a property used seasonally for residential use of unrelated persons employed by the business and located on the same site of the business for the duration of the tourist season. And again, as stated earlier, they would have to define what that tourist season is. Tourist-oriented business is a business that is usually seasonal in nature, catering primarily to tourists. If a business could equal or cater to either tourist or local, it could be included in that definition. Let's see. The land use policy, it really speaks to three policies that would support this text amendment. These policies really address the void in housing for employees in tourist-oriented businesses that the county is seeing. Staff does recommend approval of this request, as did the Planning Board on January 11th, 2022, where they did recommend approval with a 5-0 vote with 1 abstention. And then here is the text amendment review standards that you're familiar with, and I will stand by for any questions.
Kevin, get the one question I'm looking at really quick. Under group living, item 4 on page 12, it was added seasonal employee housing, 1 vehicle, is that correct? 1 vehicle for every 2 residential beds?
Yes, sir.
How many beds could those houses potentially have in them?
As this is written, there is no
Limit on the beds?
no limit to
Thank
the
you.
beds.
What about an age limit? Any age limits, putting 16-year-olds that work there with older people?
Nope. As this is written, there is no age limit or restriction. They just have to be an employee of the business.
And who defines, they get to define their own season? Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes, the business would define what the tourist season is. As you can imagine, a tourist-oriented business, this was brought forward by the water park, but it could apply to other businesses such as golf course. You could have a brewery, a winery, traditional retail. So each of those could have a different tourist season.
So any business that's on 5 or more acres in zone general business, this would be applicable to throughout the county?
If they meet the definition of a tourist-oriented business.
Now or in the future? Or
Correct.
In the future, okay.
No, I'm just looking at the parking situation. You got 1 for every 2 beds. Ostensibly, you would have an employee in each bed, right? And so I'm just wondering how you came up with that number, because if you go down to a boarding house, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. And unless it's a couple living in the house that happen to be working at a business, it seems to me it would be insufficient parking, actually.
Well, one of the things we looked at in coming up with that number is the type of employee that would be housed there. Mm-hmm. You're dealing a lot with, as you said, younger kids or J1 housing students that might not necessarily have cars.
But that's not part of it. That's just an assumption, right?
Correct, yes.
Who would, like, if this passed and they had a residence here and say 6 people stayed in that residence, do they give you would they give the county a roster of Matt, Mike, all these people live in this residence, where they would have like a roster of those employees that work for the water park reside at this, or if it's another tourist business, these 6 people live here and they are A to F?
There is no condition written in that would force them to provide a roster, although, the expectation would be there because, as you can imagine, for enforcement purposes, checking that they're actually employees of the park and how many employees are there would be necessary.
That and the age that Commissioner Jarvis mentioned, that could be written into the conditional rezoning and use permit,
Yes.
could it not?
Yes. And that is the other aspect of it is a conditional zoning as an accessory use, so it does come before you to look at each situation.
I am concerned over, and I understand the reason, because I was on the board when we saw the dormitories that were proposed and understood the thought behind that. But I am really concerned about and the county-wide implication of this. I mean, not that any of these businesses would do this. Sanctuary Vineyard could. Any of the campgrounds could.
Yes, sir.
I mean, there's, and that's just off the top of my head. And I'm concerned as to how this would be enforced. You know, because technically you could have I'm assuming you could have a 16-year-old in basically the same house as a 24-year-old, 25-year-old. You have the potential of adults that are legally able to consume alcoholic beverages. This is the way this looks. The list of concerns are huge, and I don't know what I expected the dormitories' requirements to carry with them. This isn't it. But
I agree.
There's so many, like you said, what ifs, I guess. I mean, you have a 16-year-old in a house with 5 24-year-olds and they're partying, and then that kid partakes in alcohol or gets alcohol poisoning, I mean, that could happen.
I just look at it.
Had to be in the
each
dorm to do that.
Well, I just look at a college dormitory, right? And you know what goes on there. Of course, it didn't go on where I went to school, but I visited schools where it did go on. And you know, it's basically the same situation, except that your younger age can potentially be significantly younger than those in a college setting. I mean, the way we're at right now, I'm really uncomfortable with the way this reads. And this, I think, and I'm going to jump way out in front of the bus, I think this warrants a work session to discuss this one and go through this one. Like 5 acres, where did that number come from?
That was the acreage that came in that the applicant requested.
Okay. Is anything like this being done anywhere else in the state or in our area that we could compare this to?
I would have to look into that and see what examples we could find.
Because when we're, cutting edge here, I prefer not to learn all the lessons for us. If we could, Virginia Beach has a huge tourist population. I'm curious if it's being done anywhere else, because I don't want to be the example everybody points to.
Yeah, this is an issue in several coastal communities. I know Virginia Beach does have that issue, and it does not have an ordinance like this. It relies on private homeowners to house, J1 students and seasonal employees.
So, and I know this isn't part of the zoning. Well, okay, we'll just stick with this. So, do we housing for 100% of the employees, would be, is that something that from a conditional perspective, I'm not sure in other words, do you get to build enough housing for 100% of the employees that work at your facility? Is that logical? Anyway, this
could allow you for all your employees, it says, yeah.
Right.
Did you say you had somebody over here had a question or comment?
In the conditions, you can put certain criteria on it, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And, I think about down at the Outer Banks, there are houses that have kids that are living in them that are seasonal. The only thing we're allowing is for them to put something there. And I don't think you can say, well, we don't want the 16-year-olds with the 25-year-olds. That's up to the parent. So we're going to start telling people this floor is for only guys who are 25 years and above, and this floor.
The fuddy-duddy over there, yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, like when the
that's not-
when the lifeguards
Not
stay
our-
in the,
that's not
when the
our
lifeguards stay at the beach. I mean, you're having people of the same age frame.
They're
I don't
college
know.
students,
Yeah,
yeah.
they're college kids. I don't know that we would have a 16-year-old even possibly staying there, but it could happen. You know what I'm saying? I mean, and I don't think that would, you know.
Anything could happen.
Oh yeah, I mean,
But
they could have their little brothers come for a weekend, and then you know, I mean,
They
it's-
can't stay there. They have to be employees. They can't have their little brother.
But we
come
brought that
stay
up
there.
of who's checking that and who's enforcing that. I mean, you could say I have these 6 guys and us 3 be through those, and then we go out of town, and then you bring in 3 new ones for the weekend.
You don't have enough in your sheriff's department to keep a check on
Oh
that.
no, there's definitely not, and even
Well, that's to Paul's point.
Yeah.
You can't. We couldn't monitor this in any way, shape, or form, and I don't think the lifeguard situation even is remotely the same as this situation.
well, I was trying to say that's
No,
the similar
I understand,
age.
right,
Yeah,
I understand what you're saying, but Miss Kitty's trying to put those two on the same playing field, and they're not. And it's a home. It's a private home that someone has opened up to rent to someone, a room. So that is a normal operation in the Outer Banks. This is a different thing when they're going to build something to house people, workers, and it is a completely different animal from a home. There's a lot of problems with it, and just from a business standpoint, I get it, and I have a problem with it being 5 acres. See, Doug Brindley's back there. Maybe he would want to build it on land that he owns for his business, for his seasonal employees. He employs a lot of people. Twitty employs a lot of people. While it is countywide, if it goes that way, it's also excluding a lot of businesses that employ a lot of people, a lot of seasonal workers, J1 employees, and they hire locally. Maybe they wouldn't want to avail themselves of this availability. So we're also excluding a bunch of businesses that are here in the county.
To that effect, does Food Lion in Corolla, is that like a tourism or oriented business?
Right. No.
Largely.
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, that's all that comes in
and
there, right?
locals do go in as well. How many months of the year do people shop at Food Lion?
Oh, that's to my point. Are we going to check what they define as their season? Every business is different. If if a golf course is thinking about this, well, I mean, I can't imagine playing golf right now, but I know people do. It becomes then year-round housing for some, and then others, and then it becomes an enforcement issue. If one business is year-round, but it's seasonal and tourist-related, it just, to me, this just opens a can of worms that it's a mess.
Do we have any
Work.
more questions for Mr. Kemp? If not, I'll invite the applicant to come forward at this time, unless we have some more specific questions for Mr. Kemp at this time. If not, thank you. I'll invite the applicant to come forward if you'd like at this time to.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. If you could just state your name and address just for the record, please.
Ken Ellis, owner, H2OBX Water Park.
Okay.
Appreciate the opportunity to hear the request for housing. There's no question why I doubt why we're asking for it, right? It's hard to find staff to operate our business. We had to close the last 2 weeks of summer last year because schools went back, colleges and high schools, and we couldn't staff. So we lost 10 operating days prior to Labor Day. When we thought about the temporary and permanent housing, because if I remember, Mike, it was in our initial approval process, it was more to make sure we had options. We don't have an immediate plan to go build a housing project on our site right now. The first few years of our operation, we relied a lot on J1, international, kids that would come over and staff, and we would hire 40 to 60 to 70 J1s. Our total staffing count to operate the water park through the season is close to 300 people. J1s were not allowed with all of COVID this last year, which caught us short, and J1s are usually the key that allowed us to open all the way through Labor Day as the schools went back. J1s now are back for next season, but they've eliminated the residential housing alternative. In 2019, we had 53 J1s, and they were all housed at individuals' homes because they pay, I don't know the exact number, $100 a week. And so individuals would, the J1 consulting companies would come and find individuals that wanted to have, would welcome the kids, and they would get paid. If they had 2 or 3 kids, they get paid the money and they could stay there. Then we had a shuttle service which would go around and pick them up and bring them to the park. The J1 guidelines now is you have to provide housing or find housing. They don't use the residential housing anymore. So we would, in our first year actually, we went and rented 10 apartments. Elon had those townhouses behind right near the park. And we went and rented 6 of those for 6 months and put 3 or 4 J1s in there, even though we only needed them for 3 months. We had to sign a minimum of a 6-month rent. So we would pay for that and supplement that income. So it's more to try to figure out how we can house the J1 staff. If there are some students or kids that aren't going back to school that would stay there, they would. The J1 program regulates, how many kids per room and the age group and all that. That's really what this is about. It isn't about having a college dorm. It isn't about having permanent housing. It isn't, it's to give a spot so we can have enough staff. We haven't, but we were told to go look to buy houses. Everybody does it. People, they go businesses go buy homes, and they put 10, 15, 20 people in those homes to work for the season. There's no regulation on those. You don't regulate those homes. You don't go out and see who's in those homes. This was actually a more proactive way to try to find staff for our park. Our season is Labor Day, Memorial Day to Labor Day, so we would probably be looking maybe May through September, right, to get people on board to train them and then help close the park up. Last year, we did operate 2 weekends in September to try to make up for the days that we couldn't open during the season. And it was well received. We had 4 days, and our high school staff that were back at school could come and staff us for the weekend. So that's how we made up a little bit of that. The 5-acre requirement, honestly, I think it might have been a planning board recommendation, Mike, because we didn't. Planning staff, excuse me.
Initial application was after staff review, it was basically like more just the application before this.
So 5 acres, I agree. If the county's going to allow a business to provide housing for their own business, you're right. If someone has an acre, they should be able to maybe build something that could house 5 people that could help them operate, right? So the 5 acre was not anything that we were looking at. Initially, we were approached by a group that builds employee housing for J1s around the country, in the Wisconsin Dells and Tennessee and Orlando, and they said, hey, you have some land, we can come build a 100-bed or 200-bed dorm. The Outer Banks is in need of this, and they finance it and support it by the J1 fee. So that's how this whole thing got started. But I believe that group is now moving down to Dare County. So I think there's some funds available or something for employee housing, and which is good, because if they do that, there's 200 to 400 beds. We can still place J1s and they can stay there. We'll just run a shuttle service. So I guess what I'm saying is we just wanted to have options on our land, and the next amendment you'll hear is for temporary. The goal isn't to have permanent temporary. I was panicking trying to say, okay, if I need 40 employees to operate this season, could I buy some temporary homes, bring them in, and at least be able to open? That's what the next top agenda item is. So that was just to get through this year. We're not going to be able to do either of them this year, but Mike said, why don't we at least go through the process? We've gone this far, and at least have options open. And I think it's important that it's a conditional use, that if and when we do come back and say, look, here's what we want to do, it's a 4-room house that can house 8 people, et cetera, we'd have to come get approval for that, right? And they would have to approve. So you would see what we would be presenting if and when we went ahead and did it. So that was the rationale behind how we got there, and Mike's group has worked with the planning staff and the planning board to get us here. I do think developing something that the county's comfortable with that could allow seasonal businesses an opportunity to provide housing for staff is a good thing. We're just trying to, and be happy to work to figure out what the best way to do that is. So
Probably the best thing you said is you're not trying to get this in place for this year.
I'm just, we're not trying, hey, we came down, my partner and I, we developed the park down in Lower Currituck in 2016, spent a lot of money at it. We had a rough couple of years. I know I'm off topic, but I'm here. We had a good year last year. We kind of changed our marketing approach, and we marketed up to Norfolk and Chesapeake Bay, and we still got a fair amount of tourists coming off the beach, but we also had a lot of people come go, hey, we didn't know you had that down there. They have Ocean Breeze up in Virginia Beach. So we're not just stealing their sand, now we're stealing their water park guests coming down to Currituck.
We are not stealing their sand, they're giving it to us.
Okay.
Really donating it to the ocean.
Sure. They are finding us down here because it's a great park and it's easy to get to. So
Having been to Ocean Breeze,
yes,
I went there once. But
I've been there. I know the owner there, and he actually I've done some work for him, and he was kidding. He goes, "Are you keeping a separate bank account that all the people that you're taking, you can give me that money back?" I'm like, no, it's good. We'll keep them down here. But so we're not trying to rush anything through. We're just trying to keep our options to see if we have to with the J1. Really, with the J1 change, because it worked perfectly when they stay in home. So
I think and I hope you've heard this too, and what I've heard from this board is this text amendment would be effective for the entire county. Everybody, any future businesses that came into GB or whatever. So, and there's a lot of open questions I've heard, what ifs and different scenarios that could pop up. And to try to add those tonight, to me, I would think would be very difficult.
Honestly, I thought this was just for a use permit for our site. I did not know we were opening it up for everything.
It would be
that
the
were
entire
doing.
county could take advantage of this
Right,
once it's approved. So, you could hear some of the concerns, especially when you got to consider the entire county.
Yeah, and I think, hey, it's no secret, we went and tried to buy some houses, but they're only on the market for a day, and we couldn't find any, so, which is a good thing. So, yeah, I think we'd be happy to, with Quibble and Mike and the planning staff, to further refine what makes the best sense, not just for us, but for all the businesses in the county. But I happen to be down here, wanted to come and speak to that. So, any other questions for?
Any other questions? Oh, yeah, sorry, you say something.
Thank you.
Yeah, if you could just state your name, address for the record.
Michael Strader with Quibble and Associates, the engineer of record for the zoning text amendment. Hearing some of the thoughts and concerns, it did bring up a question that I should have asked this question while Mr. Kemp was up here, but if I may, I'd like to just ask a question for a point of clarification. And I think I had understood this from Tammy, but she's not here that I know of.
Yes, she is.
Yes, she is.
Okay.
She's hiding back there.
So, a previously approved conditional zoning application did include dormitories for that subject parcel. I'm trying to understand, and I think it even showed 100 room dormitories. If this zoning text amendment doesn't move forward, is there still any entitlement for H2OBX, given that that was on an approved conditional zoning application?
It's on the approved master plan, but it's not an allowable use in the general business zoning district. So that was a two-step process. The master plan got approved, and then it required this text amendment for it to happen.
So yes, that wouldn't be able to move forward. So that wouldn't be able to move forward without a.
I don't think, if I may say, I don't think this board, I mean, definitely, we support you and we support you. I'm glad y'all had a great year. And like I said, I know we've had some of our deputies and jailers actually work when you lost your college kids. We've had some of our guys where they've aggressively tried to get people to go to work, which, I'm sure those guys appreciate that for you as well as for them. But like I said, I guess maybe there's like so much to it where I believe Commissioner White said, maybe a work session where we hash this out and figure it out.
He was close.
Good idea.
Yeah.
It's yours. I'm sorry.
No, I think Commissioner McCord, and Commissioner Beaumont hit on it. As it's written right now, I don't think it passes tonight. Okay, and I think it needs to be a board-initiated change to the UDO, where the planning staff can write something that makes sense, and we'll have the opportunity to bat that around with them and influence that language to something we can all
And I
get
think,
on board with.
just random thoughts is, targeting J1 and their unique requirements, I think provides a degree. Plus,
Provide some clarity and boundaries around.
yeah,
Correct.
and they've got their requirements, right? They've got specifications that you have to follow or you get kicked out of the J1 program.
Because right now, this just says
Anybody.
employees.
Well, if you could go in and say that 60% of it had to be J1, you could,
Again, these are all
Wow.
work session.
Right.
other businesses.
And that's the problem, that this, because it's applicable to the whole county, there's so many loopholes and vagueness that it needs real thought, real work before we delve into and wade into that water, definitely.
The one thing that would help,
Come on,
and
Finley.
I'm sorry,
No, I was just thinking with the mic.
and I think Commissioner Etheridge alluded to it. It'd be interesting to know, and Kevin maybe, what percentage of your employees are J1, right? And how many are kids, whatever, right? But I think along that same vein, it'd be interesting to know from Food Lion, for example, and Harris Teeter, similar proportions, just to try and get an idea of how crucial a role J1 plays, and what that may provide some degree.
And I'd like to see the requirements they have for housing.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's a reason why that group's coming down here trying to build housing, because they've done enough research to know that there's a need for it, right? And the J1, if we have 300 employees, our goal, we would try to have 50 to 70 J1s, because it takes us about 25 to 30 people to open our park. So when they all go back to school, that's really where we come across with it. Now, this year, I understand Currituck, the school district's going back a week later. I think the calendar.
We did that for you.
Thank you. Which,
King's Dominion rule.
which up in, I'll just make the pitch, up north, Labor Day. A lot of the schools go back after Labor Day, and for the seasonal tourists, Kitty Hawk Heights, it's up in a resort we used to in Pennsylvania. We actually went and lobbied and supported and got an emphasis for the schools to go back after Labor Day. So that's probably for the school board, but I'll leave it at that.
Virginia, they called it the King's Dominion.
The King's Dominion rule.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
All right, well, is any of
Thank
the
you.
board, thank you. Does the board have any other questions, applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to move that we continue this and allow staff and,
Well, hold on, I got to open up.
We got to have a public hearing.
Intention to have the public hearing?
Yeah, I've got to have the public hearing first. I was going to open up that. So if that's all the questions, I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing on PB 21-27. I have no one signed up. Is there anyone in the audience that wishes to speak at the public hearing regarding this? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this, and then I'll go ahead and ask the board to take action if there's a motion or
Well, I'll make a motion. I make a motion to deny PB 2127 OBX, H2O OBX, because the request is not consistent with the 2006 Land Use Plan Policy CA8, ML1, HN10, HN10, and the request is not reasonable and not in the public interest because it does not equitably allow new and existing businesses to attract seasonal and year-round workers.
I will second that with the caveat that I would like to, it sounds like the board would like to direct staff to maybe come forward with some language.
Absolutely.
To address this.
Yes, we're going to take.
But you're
But wait a minute,
blocking,
but we're, if we,
by
if
denying,
if
you're
we deny it, we're
blocking a
blocking it,
large-
they'd have to wait a certain, if,
They're going to have to either way.
It's going to be a board-initiated
oh, it's going to be on our end, okay.
We're going to
okay.
initiate
Yeah,
it. so they
that's
don't-
what I'm
it's not gonna
saying.
stop
I'm sorry.
them.
As
We were both looking at each other
yeah,
saying the same
no,
thing.
I'd like staff to bring forward some language for us to deal with this issue so that we can move forward on it.
Okay, so you have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to take a recess before we get into to B. If we could take about a 5-minute recess.
Chairman, before we
Yes, sir.
do that,
Yes, sir?
item number B.
That's why we're taking a recess for, to discuss that with the applicant. See if they want.
Sorry. Item B, I don't know the procedure, but if you want to do the same thing. Hold up.
That is.
All right, I'm going to get the meeting back in session. The next item we have is item B, BB 16-05 H2OBX LLC, amended CGB zoning request to provide temporary seasonal employee housing units at the water park located at 8526 Currituck Highway, map 124, lot 137L, Poplar Branch Township. Could I have the applicant come forward, please?
Ken Ellis, H2OBX Water Park. Mr. Chairman, at this time, we'd like to withdraw Agenda Item B.
Okay, thank you, sir.
You're
Appreciate it. Okay. That'll be withdrawn. Okay, and our next item is going to be item C, the PB 21-30, Currituck County, request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance definition of public infrastructure to include utilities regulated by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. We have our Director Kevin Kemp again.
All right, thank you, Chairman. This is a text amendment. You might recognize it was initiated by the board at the September 20th workshop. If you'll remember, that workshop addressed the Eagle Creek wastewater treatment plant and in regards to the New Falls development, and in that a discussion came up of public versus private and the ability to essentially bond but performance guarantee a private utility. So to give you a little background, as our ordinance stands right now, for a subdivision, you can only provide a performance guarantee for public infrastructure. You can also provide performance guarantee for public infrastructure for a site plan, but then the only case you can do it for a private improvement is on a site plan, not a subdivision plan. So what this text amendment would do would allow a private utility to be performance guaranteed in a subdivision. This is really the guts of the request. What it does is changes the definition of public infrastructure. Rather than what it currently states, where a utility has to be owned or maintained by the state or county, it would also now include a utility regulated under the jurisdiction of the North Carolina Utilities Commission. So there are 3 land use policies that staff feels relate to this request. The first, WS1, in that it provides multiple options for future utility solutions. WS2, in that utilities expansion policy and where utilities should be extended. And WS3 regarding package treatment plants. What it really does is provide for more creativity in utility solutions. You know, as we grow as a county, you know, and utilities may transition over to some private ownership, this would allow for that flexibility. Staff recommends approval of this text amendment, as did the Planning Board, with a recorded vote of 6-0. And here are the text amendment review standards, and I'll stand by for any questions.
So, just reading through this and trying to, you know, wrap my head around. So this basically addresses the problem Allied Properties had, I'm thinking, because they couldn't bond their public utilities. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Allied Properties wanted to provide the county a performance guarantee, which would allow them to move forward with the approval process prior to the water line being completed. Because it was
Water line.
the wastewater line,
Got it.
excuse
Okay.
me. Because it wasn't a public
Got it.
utility, we were unable to do that. What this does is opens that up and treats public utilities and private equally, as long as they are both regulated by the Utilities Commission and DEQ. So that as long as they have the same regulatory bodies at the state level, they're treated the same in our ordinance.
Okay, because I think there was, I think the way it was worded before, it was so vague and you couldn't really,
Well, it only allowed for county and state.
yes, so.
Yeah, what the amendment will do is to allow for those utilities regulated by the North Carolina Utilities Commission to also be included in the litany of utilities for which a guarantee bond may be posted.
Which is, and that's pretty, I mean. I don't know what
Now, would
it
that
was
be would that be a guaranteed bond for the life of the, or just during the?
If I remember correctly, specifically because it was a private utility, even though it was regulated by the state, he was at a standstill until the
line got done.
Until the line
wastewater
was-
line got installed and pressure checked.
No, I'm saying more of, like you said, far as not just for that scenario, far as like if somebody has, if, we'll just use Eagle Creek. All right, Eagle Creek, if they're bonded in the future, say we have something where they have a private and they're bonded and it's not performing like it's supposed to be, this not.
This is a performance bond for the installation.
For the installation, okay, that's what I was asking, if it's only for the installation.
So what you know, the problem with Allied Properties at the time was public infrastructure definition allowed for aspects of the public realm owned and maintained by the county or state.
Okay.
And the system was not owned or maintained by the county or state. It was a private system, but regulated by the North Carolina Utilities Commission. And so
Right.
that's what this now will add to our definition for public infrastructure and allow for a performance bond for those types of systems.
Right, and the bond would be held until that work is completed.
I got you. Thank you.
Probably not, but. Any other questions for staff on this? If not, at this time, thank you, Kevin. I'm going to go ahead and open up the public hearing for PB 2130. I have no one signed up for the public hearing portion. Is there anyone who showed up late that wishes to speak on this? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing portion of this and move for board action on this. I have a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend approval of PB 21-30, amend the definition of public infrastructure because the request is consistent with land use plan policies WS1, WS2, and WS3. The request is reasonable and in the public interest because it will allow for the possibility of more creative options regarding utility service and providers, which is critical to successfully accommodate responsible growth. The amendment also brings equity to public and private utilities that are regulated by the same state agencies.
Second.
Motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion from this board? Okay, hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, our next item is PB 21-29, Currituck County, request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance to allow new campgrounds through conditional zoning approval in specified zoning districts and to revise existing language regarding use of recreational vehicles. And this one, we have Ms. Lorla Cicero.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before you tonight is the culmination of over a year and a half of work with the Board of Commissioners and staff and the campgrounds and the planning board. And so how we got down this road, staff brought forward language to you all in June of 2020 to address existing campgrounds. At that meeting, there was significant public input. That item was tabled. But you did hear a lot of input about needing to address campgrounds. And so you directed staff to bring language, to work on language for new campgrounds. Currently, campgrounds are not an allowed use in our UDO. And like I said, we held several work sessions ad nauseum. You guys are probably tired of me talking about campgrounds. So the culmination of this is that new campgrounds will be allowed with conditional zoning approval in certain districts with standards, with use standards. And so this this text amendment is going to address that, and it's also going to clean up some language and address things in their definitions and in some other parts of the UDO. So I'm going to go through this because there are some changes. There are some language changes that because we are now allowing campgrounds, we have to address in other parts of the UDO. So bear with me. I'm sorry. It's tedious, but we need to bring this forward. So the first part of the amendment is to amend Chapter 4, the use table, 4.1.1, explanation of uses. In here, within this text amendment, we're going to just have recreational vehicles. We're not going to refer to travel trailers, campers, or anything like that. We're going to consolidate that and make it all recreational vehicles, and so we're going to update our definitions. So here in the prohibited uses, eliminate the travel trailer and put in recreational vehicle. So use of a recreational vehicle as a permanent residence or use of a recreational vehicle as a temporary residence outside of approved campgrounds is a prohibited use. So that's just updating that language. And in E in the same section, now that we are going to allow private campgrounds, it is no longer a prohibited use. So manufactured home parks or private campgrounds is a strike through, so it's deleted. So that we can now allow that as a principal use. So once again, things that when you bring back a use, some issues that we're trying to go through and make sure we address all the discrepancies such as this. So now, So now under visitor accommodations, we're going to amend the use permit, the permitted use table, and under visitor accommodations, we're going to allow private campgrounds in conditional zoning districts with additional requirements in AG, agriculture, single-family mainland, SFM, SFI, single-family isolated, Knott's Island, and GB. So in here you'll see that the permitted use table is now underlined. We're adding language private campgrounds, conditional zoning for ag, SFM, SFI, and GB. So then we're going to have certain standards for new campgrounds that they would have to meet, and that's where we all spent so much time together discussing these things. Camping is only allowed in campgrounds and campground subdivisions. That's language that is consistent through the UDO. So these are some of the criteria that we discussed, and the project must be under one ownership. It must be on one parcel under one ownership. The project must be accessed from a major arterial street. The minimum parcel size for a campground project is 50 acres, and this must be located, the campground project must be located at least 5 miles from an existing campground or another approved campground. The maximum number of campsites is 500, with a maximum density of 12 campsites per acre. And the wetlands do not count in the density calculation. So if you have 100 acres and you've got 20 acres of wetland, you can only pull density off of the 80 acres. You can't pull the density off the wetland acres. And with all conditional zoning approvals and projects, there will be a conceptual development plan that's going to accompany this that you all will be able to look at and give input on. And on this conceptual development plan, they need to show all their campsites, all their amenities, like any kind of recreation, pools, playgrounds, things like that. And all the facilities of the campground need to be shown on this conceptual development plan. What's also going to be included on that conceptual development plan is the location and size of any storage areas. And the storage is only allowed for campground guests, employees, or their owner. And the storage area cannot exceed 5 acres or 10% of the campground. Once again, the wetlands are not going to be included in that part of the calculation. And the storage area will need to be screened both internally and externally. On this conceptual development plan, they have to show all their proposed infrastructure, all their lines, any wells, any things that they're going to do as far as, yes.
Let me take, are you reading off of that or off of us? I'm going back to the storage area, 5 acres or 10% of the campground.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, it can be one or the other, not to exceed?
Not to exceed 5 acres.
Or
10.
whichever is?
Less.
Less.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if it's 50 acres is the minimum size, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think
If it's 100 acres, you
it'd be
can't have 10 acres, you can only
have
5
5.
acres.
I think we had that, we had that discussion, and it seems like we just said we're just 5 acres, not
Agreed.
either or.
Okay.
Take the 10% out of it.
Right.
Okay. Right.
Sorry, thank you.
Okay. Well, that would be something we would need to note the change in. So all the proposed infrastructure and all the campground, anything associated with the campground would have to meet the 100-foot setback from all property lines, except unless the setback can be reduced to 50 feet if they can install a Type D buffer. And a Type C buffer, which is our opaque buffer, our most robust, our most intense buffer, and then a Type C, which is one step below that as far as not as robust or as intense. The Type C buffer shall be provided in all other instances in that setback. Only RVs, tents, camping cabins, or alternative camping units are allowed in the campground. And that's going to be shown on the total number of campsites and the type of campsites will need to be shown on the conceptual development plan. 20% of the campsites can be cabins or alternative units.
Lori?
Yes.
Do we have, do we have somewhere where we define a camping cabin, for example?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do. Like I said, this is a long, and I'm sorry I've got to talk a lot, but we're going to get through it. So 20% of the campsites can be cabins or alternative units. 20% of the campsites can be seasonal, and seasonal we define that, but if, let's say somebody wants to come down here in April and put their RV on a spot and rent that campsite from April until cold weather comes in October, that would be a seasonal site, so they wouldn't have to pull it out and pull it back in. So up to 20% of the campsites can be seasonal. And we do allow one residential unit for owner or a full-time employee. So here's some examples of a camping cabin, just to keep everybody on the same page. That's I call them the KOA camping cabins with a K. And alternative units. Here are some things that have been popular when I've been doing research, and I think Commissioner White has probably seen some of these in his travels, but
Saw them last week.
yeah,
Wednesday, Thursday.
a yurt,
They're pretty cool.
and then like an eco tent or a safari tent. So after the conditional zoning approval by the board, then the applicant would have to submit an operational plan. And in that operational plan, these are the things that would be required. The 30-day designation period for which they would close. In this text amendment, we've spoke about this, designate a 30-day period where there are no seasonal or short-term guests allowed at the campground. It would only be a full-time employee to take care of it. And also in that operational plan, the total number of employees that are going to be residing on the campground during seasonal operation while they're open, and any number of whatever number of employees residing at the campground during their closure period, that 30-day period. Full-time residents are not allowed other than full-time employees. The operational plan can be amended administratively if they're meeting all their other requirements and they want to change their 30-day closing period, from February to March. That can be done administratively. And if they want to change the number of, seasonal employees that are going to be residing at the campground, that can be done. And they would need to obtain there'd be a licensure program from the county. This will be done through the Code of Ordinances. And there would be an inspection required prior to the issuance or renewal, depending on the case, of the license. At least that one inspection, that would be required. And then, of course, if we get any complaints or any concerns, we would be able to inspect at that time. So that was the big chunk of this text amendment right there. Those are the standards, those are the requirements that we all worked through. And other than the 5-acre issue about the storage, was there any? Did we get everything that we had set out to do? I think we did in this.
It seemed like you wanted to have like 10 campgrounds within 5 miles, not one every 5.
No. Incorrect, Mr. White.
No, I think after all these numerous meetings, I think you have captured all the changes, the additions, the discussions, other than that one change on the
storage area.
But I think it's finally everything was captured after, like you said, over a year's discussion or so. Year and a half, okay.
Another thing that comes with adding a new use or adding a use back into the UDO, we need parking standards, and private campgrounds require one space per campsite, so you have to have at least one space at each campsite, and then one visitor space for each campsite, and that can be distributed throughout the campground, whether it's at the office or at the rec center or at the camp store. One space per each 10 campsites for those parking.
So just to be clear on that, so where you pull in a campsite, you're pulling a towable camper trailer behind you. You're not saying they need an additional site there, right? But at a cabin, you would have a site in front of it.
Right.
Okay. Just want to make sure everybody's clear on that.
We're also going to amend Chapter 10, Definitions and Measurements, 10.4.5, under Commercial Use Classification.
Sorry. Tents would have a parking spot.
Yes,
Tents
right.
would have a parking spot, yes.
Any of the alternative camping units
Would have a parking. Yep.
Yes, all camping sites would need to have at least one parking spot if it's,
So, sorry.
What if you're pulling a car behind your camp trailer, like you see some?
Right. Well, I've stayed at some places where it wouldn't fit on the site, so I put it in the alternative parking, or I moved my tow rig up and put it, whatever it was.
So, along those lines, did you ever have a problem with not enough alternative parking?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No.
Because I was wondering if
Yeah,
maybe.
usually somebody comes in, it's a buddy that's in the area, you want to, like when we go to St. Augustine, we have friends that live down there, they'll come over and cook out, and they park in the alternative lot outside and
Okay.
walk in or whatever, yeah. No, we did good on that one.
Okay,
Good.
thanks. I had to pull out the planner's dictionary and find out, the parking standards, and find some parking standards. We're adding the language, private campgrounds to our examples for visitor accommodations. So that language is added 10.4.5. And now comes what Commissioner Beaumont was speaking of earlier. We are amending our definitions, 10.5 definitions, with several new definitions. Alternative camping unit. A camping unit constructed of canvas or other similar materials not to exceed 400 square feet. So this will be added, this alternative camping unit language will be added to the definition. And if you all have any questions about that, you can read it. I don't need to read that to you. And then you see we're going to camper, we're going to say C, recreational vehicle, and we're going to eliminate the definition that is currently in there to make it consistent. Recreational vehicle, go to that, and that definition will be consistent. A camping cabin be a structure located in a campground not exceeding 400 square feet and constructed, and this is very important, constructed to North Carolina Building Code. Camping cabins may or may not include restroom and kitchen facilities. Such cabins shall be compliant when Section 7.4 of this ordinance is our flood ordinance, flood damage prevention ordinance. Campsite, a new definition as well, is a designated space designed for parking of a recreational vehicle or for the location of a camper cabin, alternative camping unit, or tent, along with picnic tables, infrastructure hookup, pedestal, fire rings, and constructed platforms. This is another new definition or revised definition for a recreational vehicle. It is a vehicle built on a single chassis, 400 square feet or less when measured at the largest horizontal projection, designed to be self-propelled or permanently towable, designed primarily not for use as a permanent dwelling, but as a temporary living quarters for recreational camping, travel, or seasonal use, fully licensed and ready for highway use, that does not exceed 8.5 feet in width in the transport mode, and of a size and weight that does not require special highway movement permit when towed by a motorized vehicle. Recreational vehicles should not have any permanent hardwiring, plumbing, or mechanical connection. The term recreational vehicle does not include a manufactured home. So this is very specific, and it essentially will, if there is a park model that cannot meet these qualifications, that they don't exceed that 8.5 feet in width, and that they don't need a special permit for transport, then they have to be built to North Carolina State Building Code for, I need to do a previous. For a camping cabin, not exceeding and constructed to North Carolina State Building Code. So essentially, if a park model cannot meet the definition that we have for RV, and it doesn't meet the camping cabin definition, it will not be allowed. Seasonal campsite is another new definition, which is a campsite designed for use by a campground guest for a period exceeding 30 consecutive days. And so then a short-term campsite is a campsite designed for a guest less than 30 consecutive days. Travel trailer is becoming C, recreational vehicle, and we're deleting all the other parts of that definition. So that's this text amendment. Let me go back. Whoops. Are there any questions, before I can continue on, are there any questions about the definitions or any of the other information that I've presented?
No, I think you pretty much captured it pretty good. Any other questions from the board?
I said something to Commissioner Beaumont, if somebody takes the school bus, how that's like the new thing now, they turn that into the camper, which would be like similar to an RV in size. That would fall under that, and they'd be fine.
If they can meet that definition of recreational vehicle,
8.5 wide and.
Yeah, I mean, they would.
yeah, if they can meet that definition of an RV, and then they would be allowed.
Thank you.
The problem is a lot of campgrounds won't let them in the door. Eh. Unfortunately, this bus ain't going to work.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Lori, did that conclude your presentation?
No,
Oh,
it
okay. I
concluded
thought
that
you
me
were-
reading, reading
gotcha.
to you
Okay.
all. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, carry on then.
So the land use plan does not provide any detailed policies related to campground. However, this land use and development goal number 10 to properly, I think applies, to properly distribute development forms in accordance with the suitability of the land, infrastructure available, and compatibility of surrounding land uses. And policy ED1, new and expanding businesses, industries and businesses should be especially encouraged that diversify the local economy, train and utilize a more highly skilled labor force, and 3, or compatible with the environmental quality and natural amenity-based economy of Currituck. I think that number 3 especially applies to campgrounds. So our staff recommendation, planning staff, so Economic Development Director Larry Lombardi submitted comments that were part of your agenda packet regarding the 5-mile distance between campgrounds. But based upon input from the Board of Commissioners, staff recommends approval as presented with the clarification about the storage area. And this text amendment is a legislative decision that's up to the Board of Commissioners, and it's your druthers of whether you want to approve or deny a text amendment. But you shall adopt a written statement of consistency. The request zoning text amendment is consistent with the land use plan because it allows campgrounds that are compatible with environmental and natural-based amenity economy of Currituck County, and it is reasonable and in the public interest, but it allows for a greater variety of tourist-oriented businesses and visitor accommodations to locate in the county. Planning Board recommendation. So the Planning Board heard this at their January meeting, and they did recommend approval of the text amendment, but they recommended the following revisions. That the minimum parcel size for the campground project should be 15 acres instead of the 50. The maximum number of campsites, 250 per project instead of 500. They also recommended removing the 5-mile distance requirements between campground projects, and that up to 100% of campsites can be cabins or alternative units instead of the 20%, and the period of annual closure to be 60 days instead of the 30 days. And now I'm done.
Okay. Any questions for staff?
You've done a great job.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
You've got.
Thank you for putting up for us with a year and a half of this.
It's been entertaining, I will say
Right,
that.
right.
Changing, well, you know, a lot of changes. Well, all right, if there's no other questions for staff at the moment, thank you, Lori. At this time, I'm going to go ahead, we have open up the public hearing portion of this, is PB 21-29, Currituck County. So no one has signed up for the public hearing. If there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak on this that hasn't signed up, come forward, please. If you could state your name and address for the record.
Yeah, again, I'm Jeff Foster, and my address is 166 Baxter Estates Road.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
And I guess I would like to start with how I got involved in this. I have traveled across country 6 or 7 times. I have a motor home. I look to retire here. I'm actually a resident here. I've been here for 35 years, and I've raised 7 kids here. I've got 13 grandkids here. And coincidentally, looking to retire, we also looked at the possibility here in Currituck for a campground. And we looked at this 4 or 5 years ago, and it wasn't an option because it wasn't under consideration. So recently, in the past year and a half, 2 years, I guess it's been a consideration, and that's why I've been involved. My daughter's been here a couple times when I was out of town. I own a couple businesses in Norfolk, and motorhoming is something that I think would do well here. It's something that I was looking at the bottom of the county, a place that was only 24 acres. I've heard quite a bit of commentary about some of the larger campgrounds across the country, and some of the things that we talked about at the planning meeting. One of their biggest concerns was, 500 to 600 campsites on a 50-acre site, and how do you manage that? And my question was, what kind of vision did Currituck want in a campground? And we kind of got disenfranchised going from 20 to 50 acres. That's a 150% increase, I guess, from one meeting to the next. And I don't know if we missed that meeting or where that came from, but I'm trying to change that and hope that turns back to 20 acres. And then the 5-mile restriction, where I'm from, the businesses that we have to propose when we're going after solicitations, whether it's for the government or other commercial businesses, we don't have those kind of restrictions. And I've heard several of you mention, I think Mr. Beaumont mentioned, what is the rest of the state doing when it comes to the water park, trying to build places for residents there. And, the rest of the state, Camden County, Dare County, they're 10 acres when it comes to campgrounds. And I think I heard Mr. White say, well, who came up with 5 acres on the last situation, and, why do we want to exclude anybody? So I'm going to follow up on that and suggest that we do change it back to a 20-acre minimum and try to get a vision for what the county would like to see, because I'd like to be a part of that. If, I've heard a lot of comments about campgrounds and what they don't want, and there's a lot of restrictions that you have. You have to be a 100-foot buffer. You have to be off a main artery. So there's already several things that's in place that's going to give you a nice product. I'm not sure if 50 acres is something that's going to be that nice of a product, that large. My goal would be to build something of an elite campground, possibly motorhomes only, on a treed site, an upscale motorhome park, a destination park that people would want to come to for a week or two and stay, not an overnight campground. So, again, a little confused on all the time involved in going from 20 to 50 acres. And it was neat to hear the planning board debate all that.
Yeah, well, there's a couple. Commissioner Jarvis, I think, will cover the 50 and the 5-mile deal. But I think you are seeing, by and large, what our vision is, and we've had a lot of problems with campgrounds here, and this is us putting our toes back in the water, and at a minimum. Now, I will say, for me personally, if we see them go off without a hitch and they're run right, I believe we probably would revisit this and change it in the future. Mm-hmm. But first, we'd like to just see that happen, right? Because we've had a lot of problems with it. And campgrounds, I've been across country 5 or 6 times myself. I think you and I have talked about it. I've been to those campgrounds where they will, such as you're suggesting, where you can, if it's over 5 years old, you can't park here, type of deal. So there's certainly probably that market here for what you're suggesting, which would be more of a boutique style campground. So I think you'll see that change in the future. But right now, you're seeing the culmination of a year and a half worth of work and us working together to try and get a product that's going to be nice, and then make sure that it's going to stay that way for a little while before we allow more of that. And it's a little different than what I was suggesting with the 5-acre site for on-site housing for staff than what we're talking about here tonight. It's largely because of the past experiences.
And I agree with Commissioner White. This is us being cautious. This area that is going to be developed for campgrounds is my home. That's where I live, and that's where I represent is Lower Currituck, south of Grandy. And no one that I've talked to, from homeowners associations to citizens on the street to people at church all over, nobody wants a vision where every parcel along that highway, 15, 20 acres, whatever, is going to be developed as campgrounds, whether they're high-end or not. There's an environmental impact of campgrounds. And I think this is us proceeding cautiously. I think we wade into it to see what this looks like, how it impacts our county with traffic, with the environment. There's a lot to consider. And that doesn't mean this is forever. That doesn't mean that your dream is not going to be developed, but this is our way of taking about 18 months to be cautious, to allow this again in our county cautiously. And I believe that's what we've done. I believe we have really hammered out what problems may exist. We've tried to be insightful and look with foresight at what problems might happen. Those may not happen, as Commissioner White said. And that is something that a future board may undertake. But that's why we have the 5-mile radius. That's why we did 50 acres. It is a cautious approach, and I'm convinced it's the right path. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, there's not a consensus if the planning board has come up with these changes.
They weren't in on all of our meetings, and they aren't the elected body we are.
Yeah, understood, but there's still not a consensus on it. And how is
consensus on this board.
How is 50 acres cautious? 500 to 600 sites?
It limits the number of possibilities to be developed at this point. And this is a cautious board. All 7 of us have been in on these discussions. We've hammered it out. We've listened to those that camp. We've listened to those that don't camp. And I think this is our cautious approach.
And a 5-mile restriction.
Cautious. Yes, sir.
For competition.
Cautious for now.
Can I ask?
Yes, sir.
I got something. What was the parcel you looked at? Wasn't it 26 acres?
20, almost 25, 24.8, yeah.
Okay. Because I was remember, and I know he came to. I've known Jeff, and I know he came to a couple of the meetings and everything. Like I said, and I know we put you with staff, and then like you said, there was some stuff changed. I don't know if he missed a couple of the meetings or not. I know you've been pretty predominantly involved.
Well, the process was confusing. I thought that when it went to 50 acres that it was already decided. I didn't realize that you could still stand up here and have a dialogue about it. I thought your recommendations, you know, you would have a consensus with the community before the recommendations and learn and then make recommendations.
There is a consensus within the community. I've listened to my constituents in District 2. There is a consensus. And the rationale I gave you is what I have heard overwhelmingly from nearly everyone who lives in Lower Currituck. Nearly everyone. So there is a consensus in the community.
Well, I don't know why you're upset with me.
I'm not upset with you.
But I've been here for 18 months also. And originally you blessed 20 acres because you even mentioned the fact that there's a water line running in front of it and how great that would be. So again, it's confusing for me because I've been here for 35 years.
Okay.
And it goes from 20 to 50 acres arbitrarily?
It's not arbitrary. It's a discussion.
Okay, Mr. Farmer, we appreciate your input, yes, this board can make any decisions that they want from input from the planning board and listening to your concerns of that as well. I get the board is going to be taking some action momentarily, and I'm sure they'll consider everything that was presented to them tonight.
Okay.
And then we'll, like I said, move on from that decision.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else that wanted to speak that didn't sign up for public hearing? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this, and I'll ask the board to take some action in the form of a motion.
Okay with me making, are you going to make the motion?
I can.
Okay.
I move to approve PB 2129 because the request is consistent with the Land Use and Development Goal Number 10 and Policy ED1 of the 2006 Land Use Plan. And the request is reasonable and in the public interest because the request is in the public interest by providing language to allow a greater variety of tourist-oriented businesses and visitor accommodations to locate within our county.
With that one change to strike the 10%.
Oh, and strike the 10% and just keep just 5 acres as the wording for the storage area.
Okay, I'll second that,
We have
Mr.
a
Chairman.
motion, and we have a second. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay. All right. The next item is under new business. It's going to be item A, consideration of amendment to Maple Commerce Park restrictive covenants. I believe we have Mr. Kemp again presenting to us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. Item A here was directed by this board for staff, particularly our county attorney up there, to look at the covenants for Maple Commerce Park to remove the clause in there that dealt with metal buildings. So what this amendment would do is it would permit metal buildings in the Commerce Park, as this board directed staff.
I would note, Mr. Chairman, that you will want to, if you're inclined to approve this amendment to the restrictive covenants that's in your agenda package, that you do so with the deletion of language that was inadvertently placed into the document. In the last recital on page 132 of your agenda package, the paragraph that begins "now therefore," you will want to strike the language that follows the words "as follows, colon." The next 3 lines, you'll strike those words, beginning with "association does hereby designate," to the end with the word "restrictions." That was inadvertently placed within the document, does not belong there. Otherwise, this document will amend the restrictive covenants as the Development Services Director stated, to remove the prohibition on metal buildings within Maple Commerce Park, but it does not prevent the board, as will be continue to be provided within the restrictive covenants, to have some flexibility and able to determine whether a building is appropriate for the Commerce Park.
Correct. And up on the screen right there, some of the points where you still can review an application and have the ability to disapprove it based on these, building design, site design, or compatibility and harmony with surrounding sites.
Okay, any questions for staff on this? I guess, and then I'll ask the board then for some action on this. Have a motion? Well, I'll go ahead and then make a motion to approve the amendment of the Commerce Park restrictive.
Paul, were you
Oh, I'm
gonna
sorry,
make a
will you get?
No.
Okay, sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
You were digging in like you were getting ready to.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry, okay.
But thank you.
Well, okay. With the restrictive covenants, with the exclusion of, on page 132 of the verbiage, association does hereby designate, declare, make known, and publish the following amendments to the Pine Island subdivision declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, that being removed. That's my motion.
Aye.
Okay, we have a second. Do you have any further discussion? Okay. Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all opposed? Thank you, motion carries. Okay. Next item, consideration and approval of Brindley Beach Building.
Can I move for approval yet? No, I'm kidding.
Evolution to, well, just don't delay too long. Evolution to be located on Lot 1, Maple Commerce Park. Okay, Mr. Kemp.
All right, thank you. Going along with that last amendment there, this is the actual building proposed on Lot 1, the first building in the Commerce Park. Last meeting, they brought forward elevations, and I'll show you a comparison of what is proposed now versus that. But here are the new proposed elevations for the laundry facility. The biggest change being that they did put 2 windows on that east elevation, which you had requested, and the south elevation as you requested, as those were the most visible from the street. Here's just a side-by-side comparison. They added the windows, but they did remove the block skirting that was proposed. And then they removed the block skirting from the south elevation and added 2 windows. So that is the elevation as presented for your approval.
Any questions from the board?
Is there any requirement that they put any shrubbery or anything around the building, or is it just what is shown in the pictures the previous pictures?
Yeah, there is landscaping that is proposed. You'll see the older elevations actually showed the landscaping. The new elevations don't, but there is landscaping requirement.
Make sure, because it wasn't there pictured, so.
Right, yeah. I think with the new renderings, they just didn't include that in there, but there is landscaping, as you can see on the older elevations.
All right, thank you.
Move for approval.
Do I have a second?
You can't win
I
tonight.
second.
Go ahead, Paul. I was going to say it, but I gave it to you.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Thank you. Motion carries unanimously.
All right, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. The next item is the consent agenda.
Move for approval.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Ask for a motion to adjourn from our regular meeting.
So moved.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? At this time, I'll move into a special meeting of Tourist Development Authority, the TDA budget amendment. So, let's see, we'll get to that real quick.
200.
What's that?
200.
What'd you say, the number?
200.
Down here real quick. 200. Thank you, thank
Have a
you.
good night, Doug.
200, 200, 200. Okay. Boom, there we go. Oops. Too far. Okay, any discussion from the board on the budget amendments items?
Mike, anything about these that
Anything
we
that
should
we
be
need,
aware
yeah.
of?
No, it's just to let's see, amend the budget to add funds for the cleaning of Wildlife Resources Commission building. That as contracts roll off, we're taking over more and more responsibility for that facility, with the ultimate end that we will
Take over that
take
facility.
over that facility.
Right. All right, well, I'll move for approval, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ask for a motion to adjourn for
So
special.
moved.
Second.
Have a motion for approval, second from Commissioner Beaumont.
Come on, I
No.
beat him on that one.
Bob and Commissioner Beaumont seconded.
That hurt, Mike.
I got to make up for, yeah, okay,
We're just
all
making
all
sure
in
you're-
favor?
Aye.
Aye, all
He did
opposed,
both. He
okay.
said so moved.
Thank
Second.
you, everybody.